Wah wah. All right, so I'm. That's okay. That's what she gets for abandoning you guys, right? All right. Um, all right. We last left with the Battle of Little Bighorn. We're going to finish off our Native American stuff today. All right. Next number, let's put assimilation schools. Okay. So um, from this point moving forward, what is the U.S. military's policy, the U.S. government's policy towards Native Americans? What is the goal? I told you last time. I told you it was important. I told you you needed to be able to articulate it in an essay. Eric, what's the overall goal of the U.S. government?
To assimilate them.
Yeah, to assimilate, not exterminate, right? So to that end, we're going to get this quote that you can go ahead and put right into your notes: "Kill the Indian, save the man." This quote is going to become kind of the policy, right? Kill the Indian, save the man. What you're trying to do is you're trying to teach the natives how to be civilized, right? You're teaching the natives how to be American. One of the biggest policies here is assimilation schools. So what this is are these are schools where native children are taken from their families and they're put up in these boarding schools and taught how to be American. Okay. These natives are taken to schools all over the country, right? Far away from their land, far away from where their families are. The children are forced to speak English. They're forced to speak English. They're forced to speak English. They're forced to wear white people clothing, white people hairstyles. This is a particularly bad one for them. Is that all the boys have to cut their hair, right? And for Native Americans, cutting your hair is prohibited. You don't do that, right? So they have to cut their hair. The girls have to have like white person style to their hair, right? They're also forced to become Christian. They're forced to become Christian, and they're forced to live in these situations where they're not around anyone from their tribe, right? So you have like a Shoshone person and a Creek person and a Sioux person and a Paiute person all like living together, right? So the kids can't talk to each other. It forces them to speak English. Have any of you guys? Did you any of you guys read Zitkala Saw's book? Um, Miss Edmonds, I think is that right, Logan?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who has all the noise in their background? Is that you, Logan? Yes, Logan. It's trying to blow our ears out. All right. Anyway, but you read Zakala Saw's book, right? Logan, you want to tell us who Zakala Saw was?
She was a Native American. She was one of the kids taken from her family, and she went east and was put into school, and she had white people traditions and like their cultural stuff forced on her.
Yeah. So Zakala Saw is a Sioux. She's a Lakota Sioux. She's from the Dakotas. And if I remember correctly, she was put into one of the schools in Pennsylvania. And she becomes famous because she writes basically a memoir of what the schools were like. And so she becomes, a pretty popular person to read, in schools and stuff. I know some of the teachers here at Hillcrest read her and some don't. Anyway, so Zakala is our best example of that. I put her in the chat if you guys saw it already. Okay, these schools are going to be, of course, really controversial because most of the kids, are taken away when they're very, very young. Oftentimes, they're taken away at like 5 or 6 years old, and then they're kept in these schools until they're about 16 years old. But by that point, if you were taken at 5 and you're not released until you're like 16, are you really going to be part of your tribe anymore? No, right? Many of these natives are just going to go and not be part of their tribe. They're never going to return. Some of them do, Some of them return, but many of them don't. Many of them have become whitewashed. They're also going to oftentimes commit suicide and stuff. These schools are also famously abusive, where, kids who don't want to comply, of course, get beaten and stuff. Here's the deal with these schools. These schools are considered a reform. The schools are considered a reform. And let's introduce you to another woman that we need. Her name is Helen Hunt Jackson. We can go ahead and keep her as part of the same letter here. Helen Hunt Jackson is an author. She's from California. And she writes this book here called A Century of Dishonor. A Century of Dishonor. And in her book, she basically details out all of the crimes that the United States government did against natives for the last 100 years. Okay. And she's trying to chronicle all the treaties they broke and all the things that they did. And in her book, she makes an argument that Native Americans are, noble people with souls that can be saved, that, people who can be, redeemed and saved. And so she makes an argument that it's the moral duty of white people to teach the natives how to be civilized. She's going to advocate for assimilation schools. And she's not, it's important we recognize here, she's not the inventor of assimilation schools, but she's the one who popularizes them, right? She's definitely the one who makes assimilation schools. Before her, there's like 2. After her, there's like hundreds of these schools, right? So, she popularizes this idea. And again, it's considered humane. You're saving the man. You kill the Indian to save the man, or kill the Indian to save the person, right? Kill the Indian to save the person. You're teaching these kids how to be civilized, right? And she's presenting this as a reform in opposition to the previous policy of kill the Indians, right? The previous policy is take their land, kill the people. And so she's trying to do this. It's kind of tricky, right? Because by today's standards, it's pretty monstrous to think of these assimilation schools, right? By today's standards, it's pretty monstrous. And if you read her book, I mean, it's pretty racist, right? It's a pretty racist book to assume that natives can't take care of themselves and natives don't know how to raise their own children and stuff, right? Like it's a racist idea, but she is a reformer for her day. She's this like middle step reformer, right? She's kind of a conflicted person, right? When we look at her in history. All right. Do you guys have questions about Jackson or about assimilation schools? We did have an assimilation school in Utah. We had one up in Brigham City, up near Ogden. I looked into it last year. I was going to take students up to the school as a field trip, but there's nothing there anymore. They tore the school down. It's just houses now. So nothing to field trip. We just go walk around people's yards. Like, yeah, it'd be great. And go play Frisbee in their backyard. All right. So, yeah, so we won't do a field trip. Okay. Let's go to our next big number. Big number M, is that right?
It's H.
H? Good, H. All right, I'm skipping this stuff, but we're gonna come back to it. I'm skipping this stuff because I'm sticking with just natives for now. All right, the Dawes Act. Okay, so the Dawes Act is another reform. It's a reform that took Indian reservations and divided them up into private land for each male Indian. Takes the reservation, cuts it up into pieces, so each male gets a plot of land. Okay? This is also considered a reform by the white people. Okay? Natives, of course, will not call it a reform. Natives, of course, will say something else. Why is it that the white people are going to call this a reform? Eric, what do you think? Why are the white people calling this a reform?
Well, I guess it like makes them closer to kind of white society where it's like everyone has their own property, their own house.
Good. All right. So in your notes, put the goals of the Dawes Act. The goals of the Dawes Act, one of the major goals is to instill individual property ownership. Because previously the reservation was like collectively owned by everybody, right? And so now you're instilling individual ownership. Okay. What's the other goal? That is correct, Eric, but there's another goal as well. Shiva, what do you got?
I'm assuming it has something to do with gender roles, maybe.
It doesn't have anything to do with genders. They just do it by the man because they want like every household.
Oh,
They want
okay.
every household to have land, and just sexism of the day. They're not really enforcing the gender rule. Not really, right? What else? You're trying to destroy the native culture, right? You're trying to destroy the native culture. That's why you've taken the kids from them. That's why you've killed all the buffalo. You're trying to destroy the native culture. What specific part of native culture are you trying to destroy now? You're trying to make them stop doing X and start doing Y. Solve for X and Y. Oh, you're killing me here. Yeah?
Is it
Chief?
farming?
Say it again?
Is it farming?
Absolutely. Yes, it's farming. So the first goal is to instill individual property ownership. The second goal is to turn them into farmers because they say civilized people grow their food. Civilized people don't hunt food. Civilized people grow food. This is a disaster for the natives. Okay, so your next line down, you put disaster for the natives because, and we're going to give a couple of reasons why. Okay, what is your instinct here? Why is this going to be a disaster? Okay, Eric, start us off. Why do you think this is going to be a disaster? Start us off.
Do they not have like same technology to make farms? Guess.
Okay, so yes, part of it is that. So we're going to do a 1, 2, 3, a 1, 1, 2, well, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So lack of technology and equipment. We're going to put that as number 2. Okay, so they don't have any equipment or technology or seed. Okay, going along with it not having any equipment, what else don't they have? Shiva?
I'm just guessing, but maybe like a knowledge of how to farm.
Yeah, let's put that as number 1. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to farm. Okay, all right. There's one more that I think you guys can get, but then one more that I'll just give you because I don't think you're going to get it. Right? What else? Logan, what do you think? What's the other thing?
I don't know for sure.
Okay. All right. For number 3, let's put bad land. The land isn't good for farming. Most of the natives have been pushed onto land that is not very good. Right? So they can't really grow much. Okay. The last one here is that con artist white people buy the land off the natives. So white con artists buy the land off the natives. What they do is they show up for the land. And they basically go up to the native person and they say, "Hey, do you have that piece of paper that the army gave you?" And the native guy's like, "Yeah, I think I have it over here somewhere." And he says, "If you give me that piece of paper, I'll give you a bottle of whiskey." And the natives are like, "I don't know. I don't trust white people." And then the white guy goes, "How about if I give you 3 bottles of whiskey?" And then the native's like, "Okay, that's deal." Takes the 3 bottles of whiskey and gives the worthless piece of paper, right? They don't know what property ownership is, not really. They don't know how to read. They don't know what the legal system is. They don't know what that means, really. But they do know that they like whiskey. This is going to become a real problem. That white con artists are going to end up stealing a lot of land. Somewhere around between a third and a half of the land is going to be taken by like this, right? Eventually, the army figures out what's happening and stops it, but it's too late. At that point, it's too late. Okay, the Dawes Act is disastrous for the natives. It's disastrous. It's going to cause famine. It's going to cause all sorts of problems. All sorts of problems. All right. Boy, we have reached a low point in Native American history. Okay. This is the lowest point the natives have been at ever. Right? Their children are taken away. Their land is taken away. They don't have any money. They don't have any food. The bisons are all dead. I mean, this is a bad time. Right? Let's go to big number J. I, H, J, K. What is it? Who knows?
I.
I. Eric says I. I believe Eric. All right. I believe Eric. I don't believe Shivani, even though they both said I. All right. So, okay. All right. So, big number I is the ghost dance. So the ghost dance starts with this man here named Wovoka, the gentleman with the hat. So Wovoka is a Paiute Indian. He's a Paiute from Nevada. Paiute is spelled P-A-I-U-T-E, Paiute, P-A-I-U-T-E. He's a Paiute Indian. He's from Nevada. Okay, we should know Paiutes because they live in Utah as well, right? Utah, Paiute, right? That's where we get our name from. The Paiute live mostly in Utah, but he's from Nevada. So he is a shaman or like a holy man. He's a shaman from the Paiute tribe, and he has a vision, you know, as shamans do. He has a vision, and in his vision, he is greeted by the Great Spirit, the Native American equivalent of God, right? He's greeted by the Great Spirit, and the Great Spirit tells him of a future that the natives are going to have, and that the natives are going to unify all of the tribes together of the entire land, that all the tribes will come together and they will all form one unit. And they will get together with this dance, okay, with the dance called the ghost dance. And in the ghost dance, the tribes will all be unified with this dance, and the ghost dance will bring their ancestors back from the dead. People who had wrongfully been killed by whites in the past will rise up as a unified army. They will be unified together, and they will be bulletproof. They will be protected by spirit energy that is going to keep them bulletproof. They will rise up against the whites, and they will take their land back. Right? The vision has the land opening up and swallowing the whites, you know, from the land, right? And he takes this to mean that they will take their land back. And he has this vision, and he does what shamans do. He shares the vision. Okay. We don't exactly know what dates it is. He wasn't keeping track of his dates, but it's probably somewhere around 1888, somewhere around there, 88, 89, somewhere around there. And he starts to travel around from tribe to tribe to tribe, sharing this vision. And it works. It starts to spread quickly across the tribes. Many tribes within a year, tribes across 6 or 7 states are all doing the ghost dance. Okay. Now, the thing you need to remember about dances, what is the significance of a dance for Native Americans? This isn't just like, you know, the cha-cha, right? What is it? What do Native Americans care about dancing? For a Native American, a dance is the equivalent of a prayer, right? Like meditation or a prayer, right? It's a form of faith expression. Okay. So what, you know, people would call meditation or prayer, natives would do that as a dance. Okay. And so this is not like, this isn't like some pop culture phenomenon. This is a religious movement. It's a religious revival, the same way like the Second Great Awakening is a religious revival. Okay. And we start getting this unified dance show up in Nevada, in Utah, Idaho, Montana, the Dakotas, Wyoming, California. It starts showing up all over the West. What is the Army going to do about it? What do you expect? Logan, what would you expect the Army to respond with?
With violence to get them to stop.
Yeah, remember, the Army's trying not to kill the natives. They're not trying that hard, but they're trying to assimilate the natives. So what they do is they make this dance illegal because the Army doesn't. Does the Army believe even for a minute that the dead are going to rise from the dead are going to rise up? No, of course not. And does the Army believe they're going to be bulletproof? No, of course not. Right? But the Army is scared of the very real possibility of this religious revival unifying the tribes. They don't want the tribes unified. They definitely don't want that. Right? So they make the ghost dance illegal, and the Army starts to spend a lot of its time and energy breaking up ghost dances. Whenever it finds groups of people doing a ghost dance, the Army rides in, breaks it up, disperses the crowd, arrests the leaders, right? It's an illegal thing. This is where it's going to get dark. Next number, Jay, the Massacre at Wounded Knee. The Massacre at Wounded Knee happens in December of 1890. Probably about a year, maybe a year and a half or so after Wovoka starts this up. This is happening up in Wounded Knee is the name of a river area up in South Dakota. And the Sioux are performing the ghost dance. Okay, the Sioux at this point in time are being led by a man named Bigfoot. Okay, Bigfoot is the leader of the Sioux. At this point in time, Crazy Horse has been killed. Crazy Horse has been killed and Sitting Bull has been captured. All right, so Bigfoot is the leader now, and they're performing this dance. And the Sioux are performing this dance in a 24 hours, 24/7, right? Where they always have someone dancing it, right? You get up and you dance for a few hours in your shift, and then you take a break while someone else takes your spot, right? And it's this rotating cast of people who are doing this dance. And they're in here and they're doing it for like 2 weeks of time. 2 weeks of time all through this time where you have this rotating group of dancers where someone is always dancing in the middle. Okay. Word starts to spread and people start to come in from like the other tribes and other areas, right? And they're all coming into this area. They're dancing down near the river where they have, access to water and stuff. And the Army is freaked out about this. The Army orders them to stop and they refuse. The Army surrounds them up on the high ground, surrounds them and orders them to stop. This is where we don't 100% know what happened. According to the Army, someone from the natives took a shot at the soldiers. It is possible that that's what happened. It's possible. I don't know, right? We don't really have hard evidence about it, right? What we do know is that the Army killed all of the Sioux. Okay, it's a little more than 300 Sioux that are there, but I think about 320. I don't remember the exact number, but about 320 Sioux are there, and they all get killed. They all get killed, and the Army didn't lose anybody. The Army then reports the Battle of Wounded Knee. The Battle of Wounded Knee, and they send the word out to the newspapers. Newspapers show up as they start to survey the battlefield and stuff. The Army can't get the bodies buried because the land is frozen, right? It's snowy. It's the land is frozen. It's December, and so they're having a difficult time digging graves for the bodies, and so the reporters show up, and the reporters very quickly stop calling it the Battle at Wounded Knee, and they start to call it the Massacre at Wounded Knee. Because what the reporters find is that of the 320 people that were killed, they were all children women, elderly people, and elderly injured men. In the entire group, there was less than a dozen fighting age men. Okay? The only men we have are like elderly wounded men, right? Men who can't fight, like they had been wounded in previous battles or something like that, right? Or they're elderly. People like Bigfoot, right? Bigfoot's in his 60s. He's not fighting anymore. Now, the natives did have some guns, and there's very little evidence that those guns were even shot or fired, right? But what we do know is that the army killed them all. This represents the end of the Indian Wars. This represents the end of the Indian Wars. There is going to be Indian violence, clashes with the army and stuff. That's going to last for another 20 years or so, up until about 1910-ish. Mostly down in Arizona, Arizona with the Apaches down there, led by Geronimo. But it's very, very small conflicts, with just like one or two people at a time, right? Like where the death toll is like, 2 or 3 or something like that. This is the last time we're going to get a really big group. Okay. This also represents the end of the Sioux as an active fighting force. The Blackfoot and the Apache, the Blackfoot are going to continue fighting up in Idaho and northern Montana, and the Apache are going to continue fighting down in southern Arizona. And they continue fighting for a while because they're able to cross the border, right? When the army comes for them, they cross the border into Mexico and wait. And then when the Mexicans come for them, they cross the border into America and wait. And then the Blackfoot do the same thing in Canada, right? So they're able to hold on for a while, but this is basically the end of the war. Okay? And this is the end for the Native Americans. Do you guys have questions about this? Okay. Assimilation schools are going to continue until the 1990s. The last assimilation school closes in the early 1990s, like when I was in high school. Yeah. Native children are going to continue being taken from their parents all the way up until the 1980s. By starting in the 1970s, they stop using the schools as much, and they instead start taking the Native children from the tribes and adopting them out to white families around the country, because that's considered more humane. But this policy is going to continue all the way until the 1990s. I have Native American children that I have taught in my school, in my classes, that are being raised by white families because they were taken from their native homes. And I've taught them in my classes. I have at least 2 that I know of. At least 2. Yeah. And this is all the way, this is 2020, right? 2021, right? So, yeah. We are going to have Native American tribes are going to exist forever, but this is the last of the major resistance. Okay. From this point forward, the U.S. government says that the West has been tamed. They've tamed the West. Okay. We're going to transition to the rest of the Gilded Age here. What I want you to do is we have 2 discussions. One of them is this week, and it's on the ghost dance. That's a pretty easy one. It's a pretty light and easy one. The one for next week is the Gospel of Wealth, right? It's the Gospel of Wealth by Andrew Carnegie. I just posted it today. In class, they've been reading it and annotating it and stuff. You guys are going to have to read it on your own. The Gilded Age is mostly known for economics. It's mostly known for economic stuff. And so we need to spend some time with this. It's the rise of big business. The Gospel of Wealth is written by Andrew Carnegie, who was one of the richest person to ever walk the earth, one of the richest men of all time. And on the next class, we'll spend some time with him. We'll spend some time getting to know him a little bit. This is his essay that he wrote about like the moral goodness of earning money and being a businessman and stuff. And so we need to spend a little bit of time with him. Okay. I've posted it as the discussion for next week. I'm going to give you a heads up. It's long. It's like 50 pages, 55 pages. So it's pretty long, but I have it as the discussion for next week. I'm giving it to you now. In class, we're spending time reading it, right? What I would like to do with you guys is on Monday. On Monday, I would like to have a little bit of a discussion on it, so we can kind of address some of the stuff. So by Monday, I would like you to try to have at least half of it read, if you can, because I'd like to discuss the first, say, 15 to 20 pages or so. Can you guys do that? Can you do that? And then based on what we discuss as a group, you guys can put that into the discussion on Canvas as well, right? So you're getting your points there, right? It's my intention, not that you have to read this whole thing by yourself. Online, we kind of don't have much of a choice, but it's my intention that everyone in class has time to read it, right? That we're reading it, spending time in class reading it. Okay, it's pretty important. Carnegie wrote this as an essay first, and then he wrote it as a book later. We're not reading the book, obviously, we're reading the essay, but the essay is still 50 pages. Okay, it's posted there, it's as a discussion. There's 2 active discussions right now. Cool? Are we good? Do you guys have questions or comments or problems? Okay, I had intended to have a quiz for you guys, but then I forgot to make it, so you just don't get a quiz. Well, I'll give you a quiz next week. Sorry, my apologies. I know you were looking forward to it, but you're just gonna have to live without a quiz this week. Okay? All right. If you guys don't have any questions or comments or problems, then you're free to go.
Okay.
Are we good?